So then we get a demonstration of learning. There's a few things that I wanted to, based on this, just to do a quick review, and then I'm going to put an introduction into what we're doing today. The stages of motor learning. A question came up. I'm not going to go over the stages. We're going to have review sessions. You can come and talk to me. The question came up about fixation and diversification. Fixation and diversification. I wanted to give, the two words can mean many, many things. I wanted to give you what the motor learning definition of fixation and diversification is. Fixation is moving towards one version of one skill. One version of one skill. I work on fixation of my golf swing because I do not want variability in my golf swing. I want my drives to be consistently down the middle. If there's any variation, I'm off in the trees and in the water, and I don't like those results. So with my golf swing, I am working towards fixation on one variation of one motor program. Now, if that's the definition for fixation, what's the definition for diversification? Many variations of one motor program. Hitting the baseball. Should I only go to the batting cage and groove one variation of swing? Why not? Different everything. I mean, it's an unpredictable. I have no idea. So what do I want? I want a swing that allows me to handle as many possible variations. And so when you look at, I don't have, there's a very famous slide you have where you're going from many to one for fixation, and for diversification you're going from one to many. And this generally happens in the motor stage after you have a program. So verbal cognitive, we get the idea of the motor program. Motor stage, we start working on, well, what is the goal of that?
So professional baseball, I was just wondering, do they have many different swings that we think about?
No. Now, this is very interesting, and I'm working with a developer right now of training equipment, and we've been studying a lot of baseball swings. And we find out that there are very many different looking swings, but they do have a couple very fundamental characteristics that are based on biomechanics. It's not a biomechanics institute, I'm not going to get into it, but you have to vary. The biomechanics would be fixation. Adjusting the biomechanics to all the possible variations would be diversification. So what would we do in verbal cognitive? Verbal cognitive, we would try to fixate on the correct biomechanics, and during motor and autonomous, diversify that correct biomechanical pattern to handle many, many situations. Does that make sense? It's the same with my golf swing. When I change clubs, I believe, and I'm in one camp, there are other camps, I believe there's one swing. And that changing clubs makes a variation on the swing, not that it's a different swing. There are others that believe different things. I'm not here to dispute that. But so I worked on fixation, and then once I get to the swing I want, I work on diversification. And I'm in that diversification. I don't think I'll ever get to autonomous. I'm just stuck in the diversification. Because every time I try to diversify, I lose the fixation.
But they both start at the motor stage.
They both, well, if we have, that's the thing, it's a continuum. Man, that's another thing. Verbal, cognitive, motor, win. These are, think of these as guidelines, not as absolutes. We're going to ask you as if they were absolutes. Assessment has to work. We have to put something in somewhere. We're working. Think of, we've had you do different practice schedules across the week. We started out with the lowest cognitive processing. We're going to end with the highest cognitive process. They kind of align with verbal cognitive to autonomous. So today, we're probably middle to late motor. Today. Tomorrow, we're going to be in early autonomous, late motor, early autonomous. Can I help a little bit? That was really the big thing I wanted to talk about yesterday's assessment. We're talking today block practice. Got an introduction to that yesterday. I just want to put the slide here. It's you want to learn several different tasks. That's really the most important thing. And Wendy, working on her learning experience, was asking, what's a different task? I don't have the answer for you. You have to ask yourself this question. Do you think it's using a different motor program? If you think it's using a different motor program, then we're talking about multiple tasks.
And that really, really helped me.
And as long as, if you ask me for my advice, I will ask you, do you believe that they are different motor programs? I will put it back on you. It's really, remember, learning experience, instructor, learner. So you as the instructor you can do it. There's no standards. Yeah.
So in our awesome lacrosse group thing that we're doing, I just need a definition or an example to get it straight in my brain. Is the pass in lacrosse a different motor program than the shot?
That's the question you have to ask.
Okay, so that's the key to knowing whether it's blocked or, okay.
Or go back, we'll talk about conflict.
Okay, and so what constitutes a motor program?
Well, some are really easy. Let's start with the easiest. Would you agree that throwing and kicking are different motor programs?
Yes.
Okay. Use different muscles?
Yes.
Okay. That's the easiest way. Do they use different muscles?
Okay.
Because remember, what's the brain sending? Signal to muscles. So if you use different muscles, it's probably a different muscle program. Okay.
Because you're,
Are shooting and passing related tests? That's where because they both use similar muscles. I would almost guess they don't use the exact same muscles, and even if they did, they wouldn't use them in the same proportions, or even in the same order. This is where it gets really hard. One person could interpret using the same muscles and changing the order or changing the intensity is a variation. And I couldn't argue with that. Another person could say, changing all of that order and variation, I have to actually send a different program. And I couldn't argue with that.
so you could call it block practice.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm going to give you a nice little hint.
Okay.
Blocked, we're going to find out random leads to better learning than blocked. And variable leads to better learning than constant. So it's not nearly as important that you make correct decisions about whether it's blocked or constant. The blocked idea is organizational. The constant idea is organizational. What's the key is, does it lead to more deliberate practice? Blocked and constant are the lowest level of deliberate practice. Whether you're doing multiple tests or individual tasks, because you're using the same program, even if you're doing multiple programs, you're doing them in a block. So think of block practice as block as a constant, which was what we did yesterday. And then what we did is that if it has variations, and we're going to do this today, we're going to do blocked variable, higher level of processing. So a lot of you want to get all these terms clear, okay? So you can design learning experiences. But just know, the further you get on in what we do this week, the greater the amount of processing.
So the word blocked is related strictly to time?
Blocked is related to how many tasks or motor programs you are practicing in the amount of time you're doing tasks. So if you have 20 minutes, and you do 10 minutes on throwing and 10 minutes on catching, each one of those, that's considered block practice.
And even if you do 15 and 5.
Yeah, it's still, thank you, Kate, yeah.
But it's related to time.
More numbers, yeah. A session, it's within a session.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
I'm asking because it's, refer to time often enough.
So I just.
It's what you do within that time that makes it blocked. Because we're going to take today, within that amount of time, we are going to call it block practice of a task, but we're going to do variations within that time. So I can't say, once again, I can't say you're absolutely right on time. It's part of the whole thing. I think the activities, I think Drew has said this, let's keep it in your mind, have your questions. I think the activities will help.
And when you said it's an organizational structure, I think when you tell someone, block out 2 parking spaces for us so we can all have a space. You have this much space, but you need to block out different sections. So it's just a way to organize the information.
And I will be floating around during all the activities, and I will try to answer specific
Right, I'm
questions.
just asking you because we talked about fixation and diversification as it applies to motor learning, so I want to be able to use that word block.
And we will make connections to that, and it's coming. All right, now, so it's the common sense approach. What's your belief? Well, I want to learn something. Shouldn't I just repeat it over and over and over again?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's my belief. I'm saying, isn't that the common sense belief? Just repeat it. Do it again and again and again. The rationale allows learners uninterrupted time to concentrate on the performance of one task at a time. Would you agree with that? That's the rationale for the common sense approach. They can acquire a general idea, refine the movement, and make corrections if needed. But here's the word that everyone should really focus on. Concentrate makes it deliberate. Does that make sense? So it is a common sense approach. It's a great approach with verbal cognitive learners. As I said, there's motivation, there's frustration, there's all sorts of things that they're not successful, they'll give up. So it's common sense. So, no rights or wrongs about the type of practice you do, as long as you always keep in the back of your mind. Are they deliberately practicing while they do it? Let's see. I'm not going to talk about random right now because that's tomorrow. I do want to talk about the connection to stages of learning. Now, for the first few practice sessions, people in the verbal cognitive stage may benefit from block practice conditions. The common sense approach really does work when you're first acquiring a skill. It really does. However, and this is the application part, when I ask the application questions. As soon as learners acquire a rough approximation of the general movement pattern, they should shift to a practice schedule to random. We'll talk about random tomorrow. Talk about random tomorrow. I'll just say this, causes movement process. Then when you go to motor, you should be avoiding repetitious block practice as much as possible. Today we are making that step. We added block yesterday. We're going to make it less repetitious within the block. Practice several tasks in the same session, rotating from one task to the next on a continuous basis. Preview, that's tomorrow. That's tomorrow, that's autonomous stage. Just a quick review, because we are going to do constant and varied again today. We're going to do that. Constant, repeatedly rehearsing a single version of the required movement or required motor program. And Kate, is yours?
Actually. It might be down in that box under the table.
I think it's just underneath. Keep going.
Up there. Block 1, block 2. One variation of motor program 1, and one variation of motor program 2. Constant is this part right here. This is constant. What makes it blocked is there's two different motor programs. Very different versions of the action during practice. Program 1, version 1. Program 1, version 2. Program 1, version 3. During my block, I can do a whole bunch of these, a whole bunch of these, and a whole bunch of these. So it's a block. This is constant. This is constant. This is constant. But could I do this block? Unpredictable order of the three? We would call that block varied.
We're gonna do that today.
We're doing that today. Then we move to our next block. We can do constant here, constant here, constant here. And then what's the next stage? During that block, unpredictable order. And we're really careful. I'm trying to be better and better. What do I know? What did I know and what do I know now? Or what did I do? I used to mix my words all the time. I'd use random to describe things multiple different ways. I'm trying not. Unpredictable order. Get you away from the confusion of the terms. Unpredictable order. So, wow, I'm really early today. So I can answer lots of questions. Or we can move on. I don't know what the next task is.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
Can you kind of explain to us why varying it helps increase the learning or solidify the learning?
Thanks. Yeah, Drew, I can do that. That's why I made a reduced version of my PowerPoint just so that I was only covering the ones that we were going today, so it doesn't match up with yours.
I
Yes.
was thinking that if you go to vary, you would have to retrieve that whole program constantly and then go back and forth and back and forth from long-term to short-term, long-term to short-term. The more times you do that, it's going to transfer the long-term index and you'll be able to learn the task.
I couldn't say it any better.
Yeah, Darlene.
That's my side background.
Well, Darlene came in this morning and said, I need to tell you, I have an example of motor learning or learning.
Yeah.
Had to do with your cell phone, and she once again nailed it this morning about figuring out what you have to do to get a certain function to happen on your phone. Every time you're getting that to happen, it's practice and performance, and then her mind clicked and said, oh, that's what I'm supposed to learn. Did she answer?
You nailed it. Yeah.
And then when it comes to the model, remember, every single practice trial is a loop through the model. And what we're trying to do is enhance that. Now, is there value to enhancing everything else in here? Of course there is. I mean, there's a value to enhancing your ability to identify stimuli. There's value there. But really, the learning part of this is those two arrows. Store it, but it's not simply just store it. It's retrieve it. That's what the value we get by unpredictable, retrieving it.
So would this be another example? Say a pitcher is throwing 10 curveballs and then 10 fastballs. Then that would be blocked constant. And then blocked varied would be the catcher giving a curveball cue, a fastball cue, different.
It makes logical sense that that would be,
Yeah.
but it's not yet. We haven't got it. We'll get there tomorrow. Because now he's doing unpredictable programs. We're still talking unpredictable variations. So if instead he gave, somehow they had a signal system that said 92 mile an hour fastball, 88 mile an hour fastball, different fastball, or fastball up, fastball down, because they do sometimes give those signals. Then those would be variations of a fastball. He might practice 10 high fastballs, 10 low fastballs. Unpredictable would be, I randomly tell you, or very unpredictably tell you which one to throw.
But if your belief is that a fastball is a different program than a curveball, then you would be right. It's that conversation that we had before. And Judd and I were talking, when you get more to that autonomous stage, or elite athletes, we were thinking that the difference between motor programs is very subtle. Between a professional golfer or tennis or a professional baseball pitcher, because they might consider the little differences a completely different motor program.
Very good. I was working in Long Beach last week and we talked about, so how do you do striking? And if you have biomechanics with me, you'll know that There's a fundamental component to all striking movements. There's a core set of movements that have to happen. And then there are slight variations, and so throwing a fastball and a curveball, I'd say 95% of them are the same. And the 5% difference is what you do when you're throwing. So as Drew's saying, at the autonomous state, they might think of it as only one program, and we would do, that would just be one giant block. But if they at a verbal cognitive motor stage, they may be thinking two different programs, and so with two separate blocks. All this is your content knowledge. Understand this. They all result in more processing. There's more processing. I can do block processing. I can do block. In fact, I do that when I go to the driving range. If I take out my driver, I hit the driver, step off the map, clear my mind, think of another hole, think of a hole to play that on my golf course, step up to the map, retrieve the program and go. What did I do by stepping off the map? Cleared my mind. I said cleared my mind. So I have to go back and get the program back. Key thing is, we want you to know the definition of the difference in the terms. They're going to help you structure your practice. But from a learning standpoint, even in block, you can make block very deliberate.
Can you say a little bit more about the comparator and what that, some questions came up yesterday and I just.
Everything in green, I tried to color code this and did we give color? I don't remember. Last year we did. We might want to do that again. But everything's color coded for a reason. The greens, what are the greens? Greens are you and the student or the learner. And it says intrinsic learner, extrinsic teacher. Up at the top, extrinsic teacher. The green represents what we are doing. All of this is inside your body. All of this can be inside, can be outside. Okay? So what this whole part is, it's feedback plus instruction. Okay? Feedback plus instruction. Isn't that what we do? You get feedback. What was the result? Okay. Comparator. How did you determine that you hit it too high? Okay, what were you expecting? Okay, so what you were expecting is desired outcome. What you got was the actual movement or outcome. The feedback comes from comparing those two. Comparing those two. Now, after you get the feedback, you determine that there is a difference between your outcome and your desire, your actual outcome and your desire. So what is the next branch? Some kind of instruction to change or repeat. That's the high idea of the comparator. The comparator says you're making a comparison between what you actually, and now we get back into, so what did you plan? This is a question you might have to ask. Remember this, I put this, the desired outcome is still in your brain. Desired outcome is what you expected to happen. So if you're the teacher working with the student, you have to ask them, what did you expect to happen on that one? Because what if, whatever crazy reason, they expected to do what they actually got? It's just not what you expected. If they got what they expected to do, we're fine. We have to change what their expectations are, but we're not changing what they do. Does that make sense? If they expected one thing and didn't get it, that's the traditional instructional model. But you got to make sure, you got to ask them, what did you expect to happen on that? We're always hoping, and I do hope that they're always trying or expecting what we think they're expecting. You don't have to ask every single time. After you've seen the same error 5 times, maybe you want to ask them, what's going on here? What are you thinking?
Well, I think that's where it comes, you really have to be really clear on your critical elements, because you can't assume that what you think should happen and what they think should happen are the same. Like little kids kicking a soccer ball with their toe. They think that was an awesome kick because it went so far. You're like, stop kicking with your toe. So you do really have to make sure your desired outcome is congruent with the learner.
I love that example. Your desired outcome is to teach them the correct way to kick a soccer ball. Their desired outcome is, I want to kick it farther than anyone else. So are we have different desired outcomes?
One more time, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I want to understand this, the rationale behind block constant practice as it relates to short and long-term goals.
Okay.
One more time.
Block constant has a potential problem that it doesn't facilitate the transfer and the use of long-term memory. As a potential problem. I say that it's not a guarantee, it's a potential problem. What's the problem? If you do block constants, you go through the loop, and then do you still have to program in short-term memory? You just did it. So what do? You make a change, but the change never got sent over to long-term memory. The change was done in short-term memory. And you might get a better result. This is that improvement we see in performance on the day of. That's why we say it's not learning, because if you repeat the same program over and over and over again, and you make modifications to it in short-term memory, will you see an improvement in movement? Yes, but because you're recycling it in short-term memory, you don't get transferred to long-term memory. This is the theoretical basis of what happens with block constant type activities. But if we get to varied, they're forced to. The practice schedule forces them to go to long-term
They
memory.
have to retrieve the information, every time you retrieve the information, it's a long-term memory.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, can I?
So for deliberate practice, does the activity or does it have to be variable? Because you have to go from short-term to long-term. Just retrieving it, would that be considered deliberate practice, or just doing the, thinking about the same movement over and over again, constant thing? I would think variable would be more, does that make sense?
It helps facilitate that transfer with the variable.
But is it considered deliberate practice just when you retrieve from long-term memory?
It helps.
It helps.
I mean, it's more on, when you do constant, you don't necessarily have to practice deliberate. You can just continue the same program. But when you vary it, it facilitates the long-term retrieval. So it facilitates that deliberate practice.
I think that's a really key thing about the practice schedules. The practice schedules do not make deliberate. The practice schedules facilitate an environment that could result in deliberate practice. Because even in the variable, they pull a program and they just continue to run the same bad program and they never make any corrections to it. That's not deliberate practice just by pulling it. It's pulling it is the first step. Using it, revising it, putting it back is the second step. That's why it's a double-sided arrow. The learning happens from when both arrows occur. Yeah.
Well, I agree. I'm understanding the block, but if you have a fundamental error in that program, and even if you have a fundamental error and you go to varied practice, now it's going to be long-term memory, and now it's more difficult. Correct. I'm thinking as an archer, if you have a fundamental problem, if you have an incorrect arm pull, it doesn't matter what distance you're shooting, it's going to be an error if you continue to practice that. So once it goes into long-term memory, you have a fundamental error, kicking the ball with the toes or whatever it is, it's a fundamental error. Is it become more difficult to change that program?
That's why with the early stage, the verbal cognitive stage, you want constant. Because you can can correct that before you store it in there. Once you get it correct, then you can start putting it in there.
I'm
And
thinking
then your idea is that the constant practice has to be perfect practice. It has to be
Correct.
the correct program. I mean, if we do constant, but we do it with some error, we have solidified a program that has an error in it.
It was Mitchell, was a tennis player, a 3.0 tennis player who chops the ball. I don't remember who said it, but chops the ball all the time. But once you get to 4.0, people hit it with top spin and doing things.
You can't.
Because that's how I'm thinking, that fundamental error. So at the verbal cognitive, that's the area. So if someone has a fundamental error, that's how we would correct that error, is in the verbal cognitive. Go back to that, that block, but it's going to be more difficult. It's
going to be more difficult because they're going to want to pull the existing program.
It's like not being a heel walker, become that's, but I got 50 years of that. So, I was trying that in the mall,
Okay, wait, what, you were trying it in the mall?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking my fit sounds different.
It does.
I'm walking in high heel. It's different.
So, are we assuming then that in your short-term memory, you're really only able to have one program? So I do the kick, and then now I have to go and do a throw. So in comes the throw,
Kicks out.
the kick's out. But I thought you could have like multiple.
No. Now, what if you wanted to do run and kick, like in soccer, right? You run for the ball, and then when you get there, you have to kick. You would start out with run, kick. Then what's the next thing? You would have to set up a learning environment that pulls the two as one.
Well, right.
Now, when you see people that look a little uncoordinated early stages that they're pulling one, then what are they doing? They stop, pull the second, and what should we set up as a learning environment that somehow, and once again, this is all inside the brain, so this is all speculation. Even by researchers, this is a speculation. So, how do you put two in there? And I think that's your question. How do you put two in there if you're trying to combine them?
Well, that's part of my question.
Okay.
How do you put two if you're trying to combine? But then also, I thought the working memory, you can have like 7 things in your short-term memory, whatever.
Oh, the 7
right?
bits.
Well, yeah, so in your short-term memory, so if you pull the kick, and then, oh, now I have to do a pass because we're doing some varied practice or whatnot, I have to pull that. This would still be here in short-term memory, this kick. But then, like, does it really get pushed out, or is it still there, and is it still just in my short-term memory?
Well, the whole idea about the 7 bits is bits are very, very small pieces. So like remembering your phone number. You say, why is it easy to remember your phone number? 7 numbers. 7 numbers. Now they say everybody has to dial an area code, but 7 numbers. Yeah? And then what eventually happens is you combine those 7 bits into one, like your social security number. What do you, it starts with 9. How do you really say your social security number? Block of 3, you do it in 3 bits. You do it in 3 bits. So it really depends on how big is that first program. The whole theory was based on numbers. That was the whole theory. And that's a missing component, is taking a theory that was based on number experiments and applying it to motor programs. If you actually go and try to find research on it, it's not there because university and we don't want to do those kind of, those are crazy experiments because we don't know what the outcome is going to be. We don't
It's
want
just
to
that
put
it's, again, one of those gray areas, and if I have 2 very novel tasks, and I do one, over and over and over again, like I'm blocking it, and then I go to the second very novel task that I don't know very well, and then I try to go back to the first one, I could very well have lost it within a few minutes.
Mhm.
But if I'm actually almost out of the verbal cognitive stage, I might be able to do it a bunch of times, block the first novel task, do the other one, and then come back to it because I know it well enough.
Could be that if you get each of the blocks in the motor, then you can, could be that they compress by going into motor, so that you can pull each one in as a bit in verbal cognitive, because they don't take as much room in short-term memory.
But
That's
I
just
might not know
speculation,
it well.
Kate. That's a great question. We can talk about it. I think your experience helps with this whole conversation, and who knows, watch your emails on the contacted people saying, I want to do an experiment. And I'll get you all involved in doing research with me, and we'll publish together, and we'll become the expert. We'll be the next generation of experts. It is now 10 o'clock, which is the end of my time.